Stand up. Ho, 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 Merry Christmas, everybody. I've got the great Jeff Jarvis with you because he looks like a younger, thinner Santa Claus. And I am very happy to share this conversation with you today here on Christmas Day. I hope that you are with people that you love and care about and aren't too annoyed by. But if you are alone, treat yourself really good. Get the things you like to eat and drink and do the things you love to do. That's my advice for you today and through the end of the year. And hey, every day, celebrate yourself, have compassion for yourself and for others, and do your best to connect and reach out. And that's all the advice I have for you here on Christmas Day. Thank you so much for being so good to me, for all the happy Christmas end of year taint week wishes. Normally I have a inspiring opening segment called The Good Stuff, the news and clips, but during this holiday time and this week, I'm just bringing you some interesting conversations. It looks like this will be the last one of the week. I said I was going to post a conversation, a new one every day this week, but doesn't look like it's going to happen. So I think this will probably be the last interview of the week. We'll see if I get some surprises, but I'm very happy to have Jeff Jarvis joining me. He is one of the smartest, funnest, funniest, most thoughtful, fearless guys I know. He, of course, is a journalist, a professor, a public speaker, a former television critic who advocates for the open web, argues that there are all kinds of social and personal benefits to living a more public life on the internet, according to his Wikipedia. That's what it says, actually, at the beginning of Jeff Jarvis. He's the author of Geeks Bearing Gifts, Imagining New Futures for News, Public Parts, How Sharing in the Digital Age Improves the Way We Work and Live, and most recently, the Gutenberg parenthesis, and so much more. Jeff could talk about pretty much anything, and we talk a lot about politics and more in today's conversation. I hope you'll follow Jeff on all of the different platforms as we talk about social media here at the top. Blue Sky is where he is mostly posting at now, and you should check him out there. Check him out at buzzmachine.com as well. That's his blog, and wish him a Merry Christmas. Thank him for joining us so often throughout the year. But let's do it right now with Jeff Jarvis. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy Taint Week. Here we go. There he is, Jeff Jarvis. Merry, happy end of year. Thank you very much for joining me today.
It is always this. It's when you come along and say, even if it's on a holiday and you can't get anybody else, and I know that's the case, it's a joy when I see a message from Pete saying, "Can you do today?" Because I always like talking to you.
I really need to book much further ahead of time. I just wait till the last second sometimes on the day to
But it also means you get newsy guests. That's part of the secret of the show, I think, because you get people who are on the news.
Yes and no, but if I planned out a little bit more and produced a little bit more, I could do this segment on healthcare. I could do this new author, and sometimes I do better than others, but I'm very happy that you're available today because you could talk about so many things, too. One of the reasons we love Jarvis is because he's a real utility player. There's so much that you can talk about that you have opinions on.
I have no shame. I'll blather about anything.
There you go. Let's talk about this time of year then. What are your thoughts? How do you feel about it in general? Are you a Christmas person?
Less and less.
Oh,
I always thought that maybe it was unfair to kids that kids could think every day should be Christmas, and why isn't every day Christmas? And every other day sucks because it's not Christmas. And so I think Christmas sets the expectations way too high.
You're a Christmas critic.
Even of Christmas, yes. So my sister is a Presbyterian minister, a good Scotch drinking one, I'll be quick to add. And so she was the good child and I was the bad child. And so my poor parents said, all we wanted you to do was go to church once a week. That's all we wanted. My sister makes it a job and I don't go. So they couldn't find a happy medium. It was like America. We're just extremes.
That's fascinating. You were ever religious?
Yeah, I would say so. There was that moment of youth when I was a philosophy or religion major as a freshman. I actually thought at one point, do I want to go into the ministry? But I would be really bad at it. That was brief. That was young. That's when you write poetry and that kind of stuff.
Was there a moment, a book, or a comedian that undid it for you the way it did for me?
Well, I can't wait to hear that. No, I think it was. So I got kicked out of one church when our kids were born. My wife and I were going to church. When kids were born, we said, as many parents do, we have to give them a choice. Yeah. We need to give them the opportunity to decide for themselves. So we go, and I find the first church, and it's Presbyterian. You think it's going to be okay. It's right nearby, nice white steeple, all the Megillah. I got basically kicked out of the church because two reasons. One, I was TV critic at the time, and they had me do a Sunday talk. And I went on at the time, this is how long ago this was, about how I thought perhaps Cheers might have been the best sitcom ever made. And church ladies attacked me because it has sex on it. I thought, I'm in the wrong place. And then the church signed a statement against gay marriage or gay ordination. And I said, I'm really in the wrong place, and left. Went to another church. There was a huge internal political battle. Went to another church, and it was all Megillah. And by that time we stopped, and the kids said, finally, we didn't want to do this. How about you? What was your raising, and then what was your disillusion?
Oh, it was a slow progression into it, and maybe a gradual one out of it. But I was raised Catholic. I was definitely raised Catholic. I'm going through boxes of my stuff. I found a folder of all of my Catholic credibility, my first communion, my confirmation, the hours, and all of that. But my dad was just doing it, putting us through the paces because they're Italian, his mother, but my grandmother, they were religious, but my mom was never religious, and she made no secret about it. She wasn't like righteous or anything, but she just, by her actions, like she didn't take communion. It was like, oh, mom, I'm not Catholic. And by that, she meant, I don't buy any of this. And she wasn't religious at all, never talked to us really about it at all. I remember when I was really having struggles with the idea of death, my mom got me a book because my mom's a teacher. So she got me a book called Freddie the Leaf about a leaf. He falls and dies, he goes back in. And I was like, that really is helpful. But then really, when I started questioning all the religion stuff in my adolescence, I found a George Carlin audio cassette that my dad kept hidden. And when I heard what he had to say, I felt like I had been seen, and I couldn't believe that someone was so righteous and smart and funny. And that was about it for me. He radicalized me from that point on.
Who was your first comic influence? The same?
Carlin and Dana Carvey on Saturday Night Live. Yeah. And my brother and my dad really were probably, people always ask that question, you think of well-known comedians, but the truth is it's somebody in your life. And my dad was always doing bits, just telling stories, and I'd see him do the same story about the same group of guys, a thing that happened. Again, I'd see him do it. He'd punch it up. I'd see him get more I could see he knew where the beats were. I didn't recognize that then, or even till fairly recently in my life. But yeah, I watched him, and my brother and I think.
Go back to Carlin for a second. Would you say that he was influential with you first about comedy or about religion? That kind of worldview of iconoclasm.
That's a great question. I would say both, because I didn't really know what stand-up was until I heard him. I didn't listen to the Cosby records. There wasn't really stand-up much on TV when I was little. So he was the first stand-up I really heard, which is not great because it makes it seem like all stand-up is supposed to be that way, which obviously it's not. But then the fact that he was talking about religion too was really just, I was blown away by it.
So is there any heartstring that gets pulled on Christmas Eve that said, oh, it'd be nice to hear some carols and see a tree? And
oh, I like all of that. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah. We raise the girls with a secular Christmas, and they're all into, there's Christmas carols start around Thanksgiving, the tree goes up and all of that. I love all of the joy around it, unlike you.
Yeah, we didn't do anything this year. We didn't. My wife usually goes to much effort decorating the house and all that. And it's just this Trump year, I think it just took it out of us.
Trump killed Christmas.
Yeah, and Musk is the Grinch, so he was gonna steal government for Christmas. So,
Let's start with him then, because he seems to be ever present in our lives, and not only in Americans. He is putting his finger on the scale for elections and against democracy, and the candidate who's more of a authoritarian all over the world. It really is a movie that we're living in about this powerful billionaire that thinks he can do anything. And just in case you're wondering, he's a real piece of shit by all measures of a man, by all of them. Like, it's not just one character flaw. It's not just a womanizer and a bad parent and a liar and a white supremacist who doesn't allow his employees to unionize and so on. Like, it seems like everything about him is pretty bad. Reminds me of somebody else.
That's why they get along.
I was actually talking about you. I thought you.
Yeah, he's. So how did he get? Because he's not brilliant. He's not a rocket scientist. He hires the rocket scientists. He's not a computer genius. He hires computer people. How the hell did he become the richest man on earth?
How about, I think if you start with a lot of money like he did, and you're even halfway smart, you make a couple good bets as he did, and he made a couple good bets. He gambled, and we don't hear about as much about the guys who lost millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. We hear about those who won, and he invested in like PayPal and whatever else. However, he made his fortune, and then I guess anybody seems to look the same way once they've got that kind of money. But he started with all that money. That maybe is how he became.
Yeah, so I knew his brother way back when. And the first company was basically an online Yellow Pages. And I was working for the New Houses then, Advanced Local, and we thought that, oh, Yellow Pages, that's the future of this internet thing. People are going to need to be able to look up businesses. It was just you're replicating what you know. The past is the analog for the future. And we failed at it. We spent a whole bunch of money building a Yellow Pages. It was ridiculous. He made enough money on it and sold it in time before it burst that then came PayPal and then came more equity. You're right. And more equity and more equity. He just has absolutely no doubt in himself. Zero. And that's what makes it work, I think.
Yeah. Or shame. You said his first company. I feel like it's pretty clear that he's not the idea man. He's a money man. He's an investor who then has fashioned himself as a genius, the next Tesla, if you will, and who seems to think he knows everything about everything from space travel to AI to economics. And now you see him wading into how government, where he has no idea how a bill comes together through Congress. So he pressures the Speaker of the House, and it looks like he's the one who looks like an idiot, although I'm not sure he thinks that way.
Yeah, people are saying that everybody's having a good time, as I am. I made a bumper sticker that says I didn't vote for President Musk. We're all doing that gag, and Trump did respond, and people are presuming that marriage is going to fall apart. But I'm not so sure, because Trump does admire money so much, and Musk gave him so much money. Musk bought that position, and it paid off for Musk in return. I think we said this last time we were together, that I thought that buying Twitter was an awful, stupid decision, but it turned out to be brilliant because it bought him power. And his equity has gone way up, and so he can afford to bribe politicians even more now.
There are some people in life that are not intimidated by almost anybody except for one or two people. I'm thinking of my dad, actually. There's like almost nobody that my dad wouldn't stand up to, except that they had something on him or something. He always got along with Val because my daughters never wanted to have any problem with her because he wanted to make sure he had full access to my daughters all the time. But you think about Donald Trump, there's nobody that he doesn't call names or stand up to, except for, it seems like, Vladimir Putin. And yesterday I'm talking to this guy, Sam Youngman, who I love, of Today's Big Stuff. And we talked about the kind of connection between Putin, Musk, and Trump. Jeff, they got to have a text message. They got to be talking either to each other. They're definitely talking to each other. Trump talks to Putin. Putin talks to Musk. Musk obviously talks to Trump. Maybe they all talk together. But it would seem that maybe you're right that there isn't a breakup between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, because maybe Musk has something on him. Maybe it's just money. Maybe it's the dirt that Putin has. I'm still skeptical about. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that Trump is oddly a follower, right? He had to follow his father.
He's a hack.
Yeah. And so he has to follow somebody, and he follows Putin. And he admires Putin for his autocracy. Last time we were on, I talked about rereading Hannah Arendt, and now I'm reading a book about the structure of fascism. I'm a fun guy. And I just can't get out The Anatomy of Fascism by Robert O. Paxton. And it's just, and we can debate about the definitions of authoritarianism, totalitarianism, fascism, and all that. That's fine. But the parallels from Italy and Germany and Russia are all there and not being covered, not being seen, and it's apparent. And we're entering into a totalitarian regime on January 20th. It's already starting. And I don't think that anybody in the media has any sense of what's coming and has no idea how to cover this, apparently.
I wouldn't say anybody in the media doesn't have a sense of what's coming. I do think we don't know how to cover it, because I feel like Timothy Snyder and Ruth Ben-Ghiat are on my television as much as any single guest for years now, because we're trying to cover the death of democracy using experts on these issues. If Hannah Arendt were alive, she'd be on as well. But I don't think we know what to do about it.
No, we don't. Why hasn't the New York Times hired both of them as columnists? Why don't they have a damn show on MSNBC? why aren't they center court rather than occasionally coming in as a guest to talk with? I agree with you. They're brilliant. They're the ones who do study authoritarianism, but they're just to say the things that reporters don't know how to say.
Those are two good points, but I have not thought about it at all. But getting to another thing I know you want to talk about, which is the death of mass media and corporate media. Maybe Ruth Ben-Gia and Tim Snyder are making so much on Substack. Why do they want to go work for the New York Times or MSNBC? Why wouldn't they? Because the more exposure you get, the more people are going to subscribe to whatever you're doing. On your own, I'm sure they could structure those deals to benefit themselves as much as they want, but it's good suggestions nonetheless.
You raise a good point of where they have the most impact. They have the story that we all need to hear right now.
Yeah.
And what gets them more? Because you're right. I think that mass media are dying or doomed. We've talked about major national media, Broken Post, Broken Times, Broken CNN, and so on. The newspaper chains are mostly owned by hedge funds, and they're cutting them to the marrow. Magazines are dying. I wrote a book about that. Television audience is geriatric. Cable channels are being sloughed off because they have cooties now by both Comcast and Discover, Warner Brothers. Costco is getting rid of its book table. All around, mass media is gone. Now, that doesn't mean, and you're right, I misused it. I just said the media. When I say that incumbent institutional media, I think that I'm at the point of giving up on them. There's tons of sprouts from the ashes that are doing great things. I talked to the head of the American Journalism Project, and they're supporting 55 newsrooms now. Lion is the local independent online news organization. They have 400 members. INN, which is nonprofit news, has 300 some members. The New Jersey news ecosystem has 300 members at Montclair State. There's a lot growing in this, but it's going to be very spotty and very difficult. And everybody's been paying attention to local news. That's the flag we salute now. Is local news is dying. We got to save local news. I think national news is porked as well.
Yeah, I agree, but I don't want to make it binary, like which is more important. But certainly I think you could argue that local stories are probably more likely to impact your safety and your security, whether it be the water is polluted or the school board's being taken over by fascists or they're putting up a new building or any number of corruption scandals that really just you can do now. Or you could just say somebody did something on Facebook and everybody believes it.
Yeah, I'm having a senior moment. Amusing Ourselves to Death, written by, now my Chromebook's not working. Jesus, I give up. Nothing's working today. Yeah, James Carey and Amusing Ourselves to Death by
Neil Postman.
Thank you, Neil Postman. Jesus, don't ever tell anybody that I didn't come up with the name because we all worship Neil Postman. So James Carey and Neil Postman write about how the telegraph changed not just news, but the nation. And they said that, and Thoreau talked about this as well, it made irrelevance relevant. That is, it took away the relevance to things we had an impact on and that had an impact on us. If you were in just a little town and you're fighting in the town about a road, then you could have an impact on that in your town. But when you hear about tragedy 100 and 1,000 and 10,000 miles away, as if it is next door, because of instant news from the day of the telegraph through 24-hour news, you have no influence over that. There's nothing you can do, really. You become powerless in the world. And I think that's where we are now, and we haven't stood back to say, where do we have impact? Now, however, we do have and should have impact on national news. And my fear is right now is that us liberals are saying, screw it. And some number are at the point of giving up. I hope that's just temporary exhaustion, but I don't know.
I don't know either. I think it's temporary, but I also think during this temporary, what I'm finding is other things that I can do within my skill set, within media and so on, other issues to be focused on. But I can't ever imagine thinking that I wouldn't focus on national politics, national news. But what are you doing in terms of social media now? You're over here on Blue Sky. You've got over 100,000 followers already. You're a monster, Jarvis. You're very influential. You're a tastemaker, I would say.
No.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying Blue Sky. I'm seeing Twitter. I will not call it X. The engagement's going down. We know where it is. But as we've talked about in the show before, I'm still there because there are people there who matter to me, and you're still there because of that reason. Plus, you got a show to promote. Threads, I'm on LinkedIn, and I want to support philosophically because it matters to be distributed and federated. So I just have high hope for Blue Sky and that we don't get disappointed again. Which one are you liking best these days?
I don't know. I don't know that I really have an opinion. I've been more focused on trying to launch the podcast on YouTube every day and do other things. So I want to do YouTube and Substack, but I also want to be posting on every social media platform as much as I can. I enjoy, to some extent, prepping for you today. I loved going through your timeline to see what you were sharing, what you were saying. I enjoy that kind of thing. And I enjoy posting when I have something to say as well. But it's all so much time that I have a hard time figuring out where to put my attention for me, because really what I want to do more than anything is the podcast. Talking to smart people every day is really what I want to keep doing, but you got to promote it and everything. So I like Blue Sky. It seems to be pretty good. It seems like Twitter is, I don't know what's going on over there. I still go over there a little bit, and as you said about the others as well, Threads knows. But
this is seen as the year of YouTube. There's been a lot of years of YouTube, but YouTube really it is the primary. Young people, YouTube put a report out that it is more than ever on the big screen, the big living room TV. It is television to people. How do you feel treated by YouTube as a creator?
I don't have a strong opinion on that yet. I'm still trying to figure out how to be treated by YouTube. But from what I've heard, it's starting to be more equitable, so smaller channels can actually be seen. And I'm hearing all kinds of things. I don't know what to believe, but I will push back on only data point I have is my own kids. But it's weird that I feel like Gen Z is not so much into YouTube. My daughters, 17 and 19, almost never go on YouTube. They're always on TikTok. And my question to you is, what's the future of TikTok? Is it going to go away maybe in next month?
In any sane Supreme Court that actually does believe in the Constitution, TikTok would live because it is a matter of the First Amendment. I have no doubt in my mind, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a law scholar, I'm not a scholar of any kind, but it's just obvious to me that this is a matter of First Amendment, not to TikTok's speech, but to our speech on it. And it's so important. It is the printing press and the broadcast tower for countless people now. It is how people connect. It is how they learn. It is vital. And I don't care if the Chinese own it. What are they really doing? I don't see the evidence that it's a national security threat. I think that's a bunch of paranoid hoo-ha. And I don't know what's going to happen before the Supreme Court next month. But if there's any constitution left, it should be upheld. But that's the other thing so reading Hannah Arendt, reading this fascism book, one thing that I had overlooked is that Hitler never eradicated the Weimar Constitution. He just ignored it. He just steamrolled over it. But he never repealed it. And they're not repealing our Constitution. They're just steamrolling over it. They're finding these weird ways to do what they want. They're giving ultimate extreme power to the singular executive. They're ignoring key precepts of it. So I'm very worried the Supreme Court will say no. I think the other thing that could happen is that Trump has visited with the CEO. He does say that he likes TikTok. He feels proud that he did well there. So I could see a couple things happening. One is he pushes Congress to repeal their law, or two, he tells his Justice Department, don't enforce the ban on it.
We'll see soon enough. I think there's a deadline in mid-January or something like
that. The 19th. It's cleverly, cynically done the day before inauguration.
Let me ask you, you shared this piece that Jamel Bowie wrote, What Do Democrats Need to Do? Act like an opposition party. Apparently they're not. This is titled, Now is Not the Time for Surrender. I haven't been paying apparently close enough attention, but he names in this piece, and you mentioned earlier basically that it seems like there's not enough of a resistance, or there's too much obedience, or trying to work together and get along with. What's the analysis here that Jamel and others are making? What are your thoughts?
I don't understand paying obeisance in advance. We know what Trump is. We know what right-wing extremists are. We know what fascism looks like. We should be screaming from the rooftops, danger. Yet you have people like Cory Booker who are getting along. John Fetterman is disgusting me at every turn these days. Congress people are giving signals of trying to get along, which is the same mistake that Joe and Mika made, right? It's the same mistake that Bezos and the New York Times have been making. And that is that you think you can appeal to the extremists on the right and that you're going to win them over with your charm, or at least with your silence. And it's the opposite. They're going to win, and they don't care about this. So Joe and Mika, I give them no mercy, when they went down to Mar-a-Lago, I think that they thought that they were going to try to appeal to conservatives who were never going to watch MSNBC. And in the process, they only pissed off the liberals, and their ratings fell to a 17-year low last Monday. In the key demographic, up to age 54, they had 38,000 viewers. They doomed themselves.
I've never liked the two of them. I liked them even less once I found out they were in a relationship, which was so not surprising. But that show has such great guests on it so consistently that when they're off and Jonathan Lemire or Willie Geist or one of the other serious people is hosting, it's a legitimately interesting conversation where everybody gets to talk and gets to air it out. I like it. But when they are there, to me, it's unlistenable. I cringe every time I listen to it or watch it because Joe Scarborough mentions the guest's name, Jeff Gutenberg, and then he talks for 5 minutes.
Yes.
I know the guest is thinking I've been here before. He's not even going to ask me a question. He's going to forget and go right on to Caddy K. Anyway,
God help us, Jim Van Dyke.
But I did see that Rachel Maddow had to take a pay cut. The future of corporate media, now she's gone down from $30 to $25 million for once a week show, and I guess podcasts and producing specials or whatever.
Well, you saw the new boss of the spinoff company said that this is the same exact danger, learning no lessons. We need to be we need to be more open to conservatives. Now, that network has a hell of a lot of Republicans on it and as hosts. But even so, now we need to be nicer to them, which is only going to piss us off more. And as I said last time we talked, it is the last vestige of actually liberal media at a high level, at a mass level.
There's got to be a strategy here with senators like Cory Booker and Congressman Jim Clyburn telling Biden he thinks he should consider a pardon for Trump as a way of cleaning the slate. Cory Booker saying Trump's been right about things. Richard Blumenthal and others are being named. There's got to be a strategy for what they're trying to do here. They can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's work together where we agree and stand against them where we don't. What's wrong with that?
Because I think that we know we have the experience now. We have 8 years experience with this, and we know that there's no rationality to appeal to. We know there's no good motives to appeal to. Now, there is political benefit to be had, right? And the Democrats in the House do have the opportunity to hold things hostage as well. And in the Senate, the filibuster's not gone, so we can do things there too. I think we should do what the Republicans did to Biden, which is block at every possible turn. And when they need us to get something done, and that something is something we want, okay, fine. That's what politics is, sure. But that's going to be rare, and let's acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And Pete, I follow you. You are my leader. But I feel the need for more leadership. That's why I'm so enraged that AOC didn't get the committee chair she wanted.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I was pretty upset with that too. I don't quite I'd like to see the case be made. I'm open to what the case is to giving it to a 74-year-old white guy who's got esophageal cancer.
Yeah.
Versus one of the most effective communicators we have seen in a generation. People talk about her running for president, and they couldn't put her as the chairman of the oversight committee. What are your thoughts? Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know anything, but except for how angry I am that she is a leader. And in the last election, she showed tremendous, I'm going to use the word maturity. That sounds like that's condescending from an old white guy. But what I mean is that she's learned a lot about politics and how to manage well. And I trust her judgment now tremendously. She's at least a future Nancy Pelosi. I think she could be a future president. She is a leader. And I say this as an old white guy with white hair and white beard. I'm 70 years old. It's time for me to move on from stuff. You shouldn't have me on today. You should have on some young person on this show instead of me, because it's time to open up to that next generation. And surely we should have learned that. That's what I like Joe Biden, but the upset about him was his age. The upset about most of the Congress is age. We've got to bring in that young future. And she's a leader. And she's the kind of leader we need now. We need to be able to gather around. So I'm reading this book right now, The Wide Awakes, by, I think, Gilman is his name. So the Wide Awakes were a mass movement that was abolitionist and almost military in it, going against the know-nothings leading up to the Civil War. And the author says at the beginning of the book that If you extrapolate, there was no census of how many members there were, but the guessed upon number, if you extrapolated that to current population, it was an organization that had 5 million adherents and members. That's a mass movement. Where is a mass movement today? We've seen it in our lifetimes. I've seen it with civil rights. We saw it with, in my case, because I'm older, the anti-civil Vietnam War movement. But why isn't there a movement now saving democracy from fascism? It's just not there. And we need the leaders to gather around.
The problem with people your age is living through these mass movements and then thinking that my generation or my kids' generation are going to lead another mass movement like that. That's the problem. Which is
why is that a problem?
You make the case for replacing you with a younger guest. So I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you. It's a problem partially because I just don't. It's so much different. The world is now because of the internet and social media that you could start a mass movement overnight about, say, something like drones, and everybody would believe a shit that's not happening. And then furthermore, when we have seen mass movements, and maybe they don't qualify by your definition of the point you're trying to make, the women's movement, the Me Too movement, the backlash to Trump and all these other terrible guys, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement, both of which you and I have been huge supporters of, covered and tried to pour as much gas as we could on these movements. And yet, were they successful? Certainly, in many ways. But has there been a backlash? Absolutely. One could argue that's exactly
inevitably to the success. Yes.
Those movements along the lines of the movements that you're referring to from history?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that look at what happened this last election. The problem is that it's women and black women who tried to save the nation from itself and got no gratitude and got too little support. And at some point say, okay, enough. And so that's when I say a movement, enough constituents that gather around rather than saying, let them do it. That's the problem, what I see.
Yeah, very well said, for sure. We've talked about where the state of politics to a certain extent and the state of media to a certain extent. What about the state of our culture? We're headed into 2025 and Trump is back and Elon Musk is dominating. And meanwhile, it seems, I don't know, you wrote about this, I feel like, this social contagion and Wells and War of the Worlds that actually happened in the past. It seems like that's what happened over this drone thing again. And it happens over any number of things. You can make a huge controversy out of, say, trans people playing sports, where there's 10 in the country out of 500,000 college athletes. There was like 5 or 10 apparently.
Yes.
And you might find one in a high school or something. Nonetheless, there is this panic, moral panic in this case, but it's widespread and it changed the nature of the election. The trans issue is not going away. You always know what's working because Trump hits it in his speeches over and over, and the woke and the trans. And by the way, buying Greenland now and taking the Panama Canal back. But, you know, what do you make of the fact that we can get up in arms about things that are barely happening just because people are talking about them a lot or are not happening?
Two things there. One is that a fascist movement has to have enemies. You can't do Jews because it's been done. You can't really do blacks because enough of them are starting to vote for us. Okay. You can try to do immigrants, but a lot of them are Latino and the Latinos are starting to vote for him. So he wants their votes. You could do gay people, but trans was new and fresh as an enemy.
Yeah.
And they chose trans, and I don't know what enemy they're going to come up with next. They had to have an enemy, and that was the enemy. But the second problem here is that they set that agenda. And who fell in but media once again? Major media, mass media went in and legitimized it as an issue. Oh, there was that commercial, and Morning Joe was screaming about it every day. Oh, you didn't answer in time. Oh, no, it was evil. It was awful. And we should call it that. And back to the fakakta drones, the New York Times did a piece last week, or I think it was last week, on New Jersey, the new Area 51, not acknowledging the role of mass media in the drone crap, right? It wasn't social media. It was the fact that you saw it constantly on TV. And yes, in my book, The Web We Weave, on sale now, I went back and looked at the War of the Worlds panic. And there are two recent scholars, Jefferson Pooley and Michael Socolow, who studied this and found out that it was the papers at the time seized on this idea of a panic around War of the Worlds to argue that radio was a medium insufficient in authority to handle news and should be kept out of the news business and kept out of competition. And at the time, Hadley Cantrell, who was a Princeton propaganda researcher and went on to be part of the Radio Research Project, which later became Gallup, and I've told you before how I hate pollsters, said that millions of Americans were terrified by the show. But in fact, the ratings amounted to 2% of the audience. And so that was a fake moral panic, a meme, a vibe, call it what we will today, that had at the center of it media as amplifier. Same with the fakakta drones. Same with trans people. And we in media don't cover ourselves, and we're not acknowledging the role here. And on the right, they're using us. They're playing us like a violin. And I will throw myself in on this. I was right about the drones too, because it was funny. And by the way, I did hear one not far away, but it was a drone, and it's okay. There's drones around. It was over toward Trump's golf course. Who knows what was going on? But I won't go into any details. So, yeah, I was there too, and it was funny, and we do the memes, but we're playing into the hands of those who use us and use open information and use media to set this agenda, and we're not fighting back, and we're not ridiculing. The other thing I think, Pete, is, I don't know if I talked about this last time, but I'm trying to formulate this idea in my head, that I think we have a shortage of judgment in our world today. Have we talked about this?
By what nature? By what measure?
A couple things. One, I think that we have a news media that still tries to be, air quotes, objective and is allergic to judging the candidates. The fact that Trump's generals used the word fascist was the first thing that gave him permission to at least discuss that idea, though it was apparent. So they don't want to judge the politicians, which is why media exists, to judge the politicians. They don't want to judge the voters. The voters judge this jerk into office. And every time he does something awful that is damaging to them, they should be saying, you voted for him, people. They should be judging. The social media companies don't want to judge what's said on their platforms because it gets them in, especially now, it gets them in trouble, and it's expensive, and it's controversial. And so they'd rather just get rid of anything that might be controversial so they don't have to make these judgments. At some point, you make judgments, I make judgments. Here in podcast land, we make judgments. But that's not happening at a scale that I think is what the country needs now. Instead, we're tiptoeing around, witness Jamel Bouie's column, and these politicians are saying, well, actually, they have a few good things to go on with them, these fascists. They do run the trains on time. Then we're screwed. If we're not willing to judge both idiocy and peril, then what are we doing in any form of leadership?
That's right. That's right. Now I see what you're saying. Yes, by all means, I agree with that. By the way, one more thing I wanted to ask you that you shared on Blue Sky that I did notice and didn't react to. It was like one of those momentary, I was like, and I just moved past it. But I'm glad that you mentioned it. It was this movement, this New York Times article, where is it here, where they're saying Democrats should move back towards trying to win over people of faith. Here it is. These spiritual Democrats urge their party to take a leap of faith in the New York Times. And it's got Josh Shapiro, the governor of Texas. It's got, of course, Raphael Warnock, who's a well-known preacher from Georgia, Senator Warnock. And then this guy, James Tallarico. I played a lot of clips from him. He's very effective against the Christian nationalist movement. So what's your beef here? We already talked about your own personal feelings around religion.
Listen, I believe in America. I believe in freedom of religion. I believe in enabling people to worship however they wish and to protect that firmly. I also believe that it shouldn't be imposed on anyone else. That's glib, and everybody says that. But once again, I think we lack the judgment of this, what do we call it, sincerity of some people. When we accept the label of religious from a Donald Trump, it's BS. We know it's bullshit. We know that he doesn't read the Bible. He doesn't go to church. He has no concept of religion. Right. But we accept that label from him. From the right-wing so-called evangelicals, we accept their label, even though people who don't go to church, who are racist, who are sexist, who are oftentimes anti-Semitic, and we don't judge the quality of their sincerity, at least. And then my sister is a Presbyterian minister, and a very good liberal, as I say, Scotch drinking one. I don't want to make it seem like she's sloshing all the time, but she's not some teetotaling holier than thou. And I remember many years ago, I scolded her and her then colleague, saying that you mainline Protestants forswore the pulpit of television because it was beneath you, and you left it to the crazies, to the Falwells. And that's the root, in great measure, of where we are right now. That's what led to, as Joe Scarborough points out, the Baptist Church wasn't anti-abortion back in the day, but it was certain kinds of televangelists who knew how to use media. Did you ever go to the NAB conference, the National Association of Broadcasters?
Like there was a magazine, National Association of Broadcasters. Yeah, I don't think I was ever considered a broadcaster by other broadcasters. When I started at Sirius, I remember Jay Thomas being like, "What are you doing here? You have to start in a local market and work your way up."
Yeah. Just like Howard would argue. What's this podcast? You got to be starting radio. So if you go to, I went to the NAB once or twice in Las Vegas, and it was a huge conference. What was most amazing, Pete, was it wasn't just an annex. It was a large chunk of it was devoted entirely to broadcast for religion, for the televangelists, right? So it was the right-wing extremists who claim that they own religion, who don't. And so, I want judgment. I want mainline denominations to forswear their extremist cousins and say, you don't represent Christianity, and you don't represent Judaism, and you don't represent Islam, and you don't represent sanity. But no, they're afraid of doing that because we've got to be careful, and we've got to worry about their feelings. No, some of these people are just plain dangerous white, air quotes, Christian nationalists. And we've got to call them that when that's true.
More than some of them, I think it's fair to say too. It's crazy, the whole movement, really. So one more thing I wanted to specifically ask you. I don't think so. I don't know. I started to think that I was thinking of talking to you. I was like, I never asked Jarvis anything about really pop culture, specifically television and movies, which for years were a critic of. Is that something that you still, I feel like I don't see you writing about it. Maybe I'm just missing it and I'm not in that world. But do you criticize and suggest certain TV shows, series, anything like that these days?
Not much anymore. It's really weird, Pete, because that was my life.
Yeah.
For a while, I was a TV critic. I started at Entertainment Weekly. I loved pop culture. I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by the mass culture. But I'm really glad I'm not a TV critic now for two reasons. One is because the volume is just beyond getting your hands around. And the idea that one critic could possibly serve a large audience is ridiculous. And that started when I was a critic. We had these newfangled things. We had cable, and we had VCRs with flashing 12s, and we had new choices. And in fact, I tell this story in my little book called Magazine. There, I've now plugged all three of my books, I think. When I remember the day when Pat Ryan, who was my mentor at Time Inc., she was the editor of People and later of Life, and I was the TV critic at People. And her job was to pick the covers and the stories and sell the magazine. And it used to be fairly straightforward. If Dallas was big in the ratings, you put a cover for Dallas on the magazine to sell. And I remember the day very distinctly when she saw me down the hall, just when she got the cover sales report. And she screamed at me because she blamed me for television. TV's dead, Jarvis. It's dead. Because it was no longer true that you could put on a top-rated show and it would gather the audience, because the audience was now, in the terms of the industry, fragmented. In our terms, we had choice, right? And that was the beginning of the end of mass media. And I think, all in all, I celebrate that. I dance on its grave because we have choice. But there's so much choice, it's ridiculous to think that a critic could really be helpful. Point one. Point two, so much of what's out there is just so dark. I can spend a half an hour looking through Netflix saying, give me something to watch that isn't dystopian and dark and miserable and awful. And much the same with all the streaming channels. And there's nothing on HBO or Showtime. I don't know why I'm still paying for them. I never watch them. My wife and daughter love Abbott Elementary. And when I watch it, I love it too. But I just don't, I'm out of the habit of watching that. And your daughter, as you say, aren't even watching YouTube. They're watching TikTok. They're not watching episodic television. Do they ever go to a movie?
What's funny, the two shows I can think of that both of them I know watched every episode of were throwbacks, old school. So Sex and the City and Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah. I'm privileged that I lived. There were many claims to the golden age of television.
Yeah.
I think that I was lucky to work in it.
Yeah.
And from Hill Street Blues, and God help me for saying this, Cosby.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Who made a big difference in television, up through The Sopranos, was pretty amazing. And I loved it. But I just don't see that in television. Am I just an old fart because I don't like TV now?
I don't know. I have no judgment of it.
Do you watch series? Do you watch shows?
Not very much. For once in a while, I'll get into something, but not very much do I sit down in front of the TV. Sometimes on the weekends, I do. But yeah.
Do you have cable?
Huh?
Do you have cable?
I have YouTube TV.
YouTube TV. Okay.
And then I subscribe to different. I'm on the family Netflix account and I think Apple TV or something. But
right.
yeah, I don't really get into that much these days. Shrinking. I watched that recently.
I've got to watch that. Yeah.
And I binged. I will say last weekend I binged because I am a sucker for anything national security, anything like CIA, national security stuff. Even The Diplomat, I like that.
Love Diplomat.
Harry Russell. And then I watched The Agency. But that's also because it stars Richard Gere, Jeffrey Wright, and who I think is the sexiest white man alive, Fassbender.
Yeah. Yeah. I've started watching that and I'm going to keep going. But my attention span is lessened for some of these shows. Plus, I'm ruined. I have MSNBC on all day. I shouldn't turn it on until 4:00 with Nicole. That's when
it'll be interesting
broadcasting day begins.
This year, MSNBC particularly, much less CNN.
Yeah, but especially as they get sloughed off.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, they're
what the economics are is going to be really interesting to watch, and they're going to make a huge mistake if they try to make MSNBC more conservative. They're going to lose the last core loyal audience they have.
We'll see what moves they do make. And
would you pay for CNN?
Would I?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't. I don't think I'd pay for any of them.
Okay.
I'd go on them.
Yeah.
But
for free. So that's a gift.
Yeah. But the exposure, Jarvis. The exposure. Yeah. The death threats, Jarvis. The death threats. Oh, man. Always great to talk to you. We'll be talking a lot more in 25 and critiquing all these things, talking about them, asking all the questions. I so appreciate you, your friendship, all of your appearances this year, and looking forward to a lot next year.
Same back. And
YouTube.
Merry Christmas. What's your favorite carol?
Oh, my favorite carol. Jeez.
Now that I asked you that, I don't know if I have one.
I don't know. I like a lot of Christmas music. I like the really old school stuff. I want to say my favorite Christmas songs and music are all those, what is it, Grivaldi, the Peanuts, the Charlie Brown stuff. I like that. I could listen to that all the time and only that, I think, probably, and I'd be pretty happy. The Vince Guaraldi. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. There goes Jeff Jarvis. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us, and everybody who listened. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, hey, who else is putting out new podcasts on Christmas? Thank you for your support, and those of you who edited your subscriptions up as a Christmas holiday gift, or for whatever reason, I really am so grateful to you and you bumblebees listening all the way to the end. It's off to Syracuse now with the girls to see my mom and dad and celebrate Christmas with them. Hopefully get a little skiing in, and then we'll be back. All right, that's it for me. That's all I've got, but I hope that you are having a lot of fun and joy and Christmassy whatever that you are looking for. And that's it. That's all I've got. I said it twice. John Carroll taking us out. Thank you very much for all of the music you have written and performed for us. We love you, johncarroll.org. Go buy this music. Okay, Merry Christmas. Talk to you later.